CYQ Level 2 Exercise and Fitness Knowledge. We're looking at bones and joints. The first element that you need to be aware of are functions of the skeleton. Now there are 5 main functions of the skeleton, and these are shape, storage, protection, movement and production, and we're going to go through each of these in isolation right now. Okay, so let's look at movement. So the skeleton provides a series of independently movable levers. When the muscles contract or get smaller, the bones act as levers to produce movement. So if you think about your bicep muscles, so your bicep muscles in the front of your upper part of your arm, now when that muscle gets smaller, it pulls on the bones of the lower arm, your radius and ulnar, and that means that the arm then bends upwards so that you create movement, and that's how you can move your body. The next function is called shape. So the skeleton gives the body its characteristic shape and provides a framework for attachment of the muscles of the body. So there are different body shapes which you're going to need to be aware of. So body shapes are classified as somatotypes, which soma equals body, and there are 3 main types that you're going to need to know. Now from left to right you have ectomorph, which is the tall and thin shape. Then you've got the mesomorph, which is your traditional wide shouldered, narrow waist, triangular bodied shape. And then you've got the endomorph. The characteristics of the endomorph are that they tend to have a lot of muscle, but they also tend to carry a lot of body fat. Okay, so if we're thinking of athletics performance, your ectomorphs would be your marathon runners. Your endomorphs would be your shot putters, your power lifters, and your mesomorph will be your 100-meter sprinters. Okay, if you're going to go down the music route from I like hip hop, so if we're going to go down the hip hop route, you'll have Snoop Dogg would be an ectomorph, a mesomorph would be 50 Cent, and an endomorph would be Fat Joe or Big Pun. Okay, so it's quite useful to have an example of each of these somatotypes or body types, as that will actually help you to differentiate them when we come further on down the course. Okay, so these are known as somatotypes. The 3 main types are ectomorph, mesomorph and endomorph. Okay, so let's look at protection, which is another function of the skeleton. Okay, so the skeleton protects the delicate internal structures. For example, the skull protects the brain, the rib cage protects the heart and lungs, the vertebral column protects the spinal cord, and the pelvis protects the abdominal and reproductive organs. We also have storage. So bones serve as storage areas for mineral salts such as calcium and magnesium phosphate, both of which are essential for growth of your bones and good health, and we're going to talk about this in more detail later on. And then finally we have production. So the bone marrow of certain bones constantly produces red and white blood cells. Now, what are the difference between red and white blood cells? Well, the red blood cells are the ones that carry oxygen to our muscles so that to help us perform movement. White blood cells help us fight infections. That's a distinction between the 2. Okay, now it's important to know the different bones of the skeleton. So what I would like you to do is pause this video and see how many of these areas and these bones you can label. Okay, hopefully you've had a go, and that's the aim of this, just to see where you're at and how much you have learned or how much you learn. Okay, now the muscles in the front of the body, the anterior part of the body, are these, and these are the ones that you need to know for level 2. So we have clavicle, which is your collarbone. sternum, which is your chest bone, your humerus, which is the top part of your arm, your ilium, which is part of your pelvis, okay, it's the flat part of your pelvis here, your sacrum, which is actually the bottom part of your spine, so it's a bit confusing because it's actually here, but the spinal vertebra go from your neck all the way down to your pelvis. So your sacrum is at the base of your spine. Your ischium is this hooped part of your pelvis, okay? Then you've got your pubic bone, which is this flat bit here, okay? So the three areas of the pelvic area, okay, is your ilium, which is your crest here, your ischium, which is this hoop, and then your pubic bone, which is here, all right? Then you have your patella, which is your kneecap, your tibia, which is your shin bone, okay, your tarsals, which is round about by your ankle and around the front here. You've then got your metatarsals, so if any of you play football, it's your instep, okay? So a few years ago there was a lot of injuries of your instep. Then you've got your phalanges, which are your end of your feet, and those are the main parts that you need to work on or know for the bones of the front of your body. Okay, so clavicle, sternum, humerus, ilium, sacrum, ischium, pubic, patella, tibia, metatarsals, tarsals, and phalanges. Okay, on the back of the body, which is known as the posterior, you have your cranium, which is your skull. Okay, you have your scapula, which is your shoulder blade. Okay, you have your ribs. Okay, radius and ulna. Now the radius is the bone in line with your thumb. So if you held your arm out in front of you with your thumb pointing up to the ceiling and pressed against the bone which goes from your arm to from your thumb to your elbow, okay, the radius would be that top bone, okay, and the ulna is the smaller bone underneath it, okay. Then you have your carpals, which are your wrist bones. So I normally think of driving a car as my way of remembering carpals. So carpals are in your wrist. Then you have your metacarpals, which are here. The metacarpals are here. Then you have your phalanges, which are your fingers. Then in the legs you've got your femur, which is your thigh bone. We had our tibia, which is the front of our body, the shin bone. The fibula is the one that rests behind the tibia. Okay, so it's in the lower part of your body. And then you've got your coccyx here. Now I've left certain bones out because they actually comprise or make up your spine. Okay, and we're going to go to them in order. So we have the cervical part of the spine at the top. Then we have the thoracic. Okay, then we have our lumbar spine and our lower back. The sacrum we already talked about as being part of the spine, and then we've got the coccyx here. And we're going to talk about these areas in a lot more detail. All right, so I know if you haven't done this before, this may be a lot of new terms, but what I'd like you to do is, if you have a blank sheet with the skeleton, is to review, show how much you've retained, and again pause the video and label a blank sheet of the skeleton with these names. Okay, let's move on to the vertebral column of the spine, so the vertebra. Okay, so let's look at the structure. So you can see that it's not a straight down structure, okay, and that there's various curves. So you've got a forward curve at the top, which goes into a backward curve in the middle, a forward curve in the lower back, and then it's sort of a backward curve at the bottom. The main reason for this is to help you absorb shock. Okay, so when you're jumping up and down, if it was a straight down structure, it would increase the risk of your spine being damaged if it was straight down, because it wouldn't absorb the shock as easily as if it was curved as it is in this photo. So think about a coiled spring. So with the springs, it helps it absorb the shock, and it's the same with the spine. Now there are different areas of the spine. Okay, so as I spoke about before, you have the cervical spine, or the cervical part, which is the top part. Then you have the thoracic, which is the middle part, which helps you twist from side to side and do side bends. Then you have your lumbar spine, okay, which helps you bend forward and back. And then you've got the sacral and the coccyx at the bottom. Each of these areas have a certain amount of bones or vertebra in them. Okay, so for example, in the cervical spine you have 7 bones. In the thoracic area you have 12. In lumbar area you have 5. You have 5 in the sacral vertebra, and then you've got 3 to 5 in the coccygeal vertebra that they're fused together to make 4. Okay. Okay, so there are 33 vertebrae in the spine. You have the 7 cervical vertebrae are those within the neck. The first vertebra is called the atlas, which supports the skull and forms a pivot joint with the axis, which is the second vertebra. Okay, so the first vertebra here is the atlas, and then the second one is the axis. Okay, and we're going to again go through these terms in a lot more detail later on. You've then got 12 thoracic vertebra, 5 lumbar vertebra in the lower back, 5 sacral vertebra which are fused, which means they're stuck together, which means that they allow no movement, okay, to form the sacrum. And then 3 to 5 coccygeal vertebra are also fused or stuck together to form the coccyx. In between the vertebra are discs of fibrous cartilage called intervertebral discs, which act as shock absorbers between the adjacent vertebra. So basically what that means is, in between these two bones you've got a sponge-like substance called intervertebral discs. Okay, and the main reason you've got them is to absorb shock when you're jumping up and down, or you land harshly or unexpectedly. Alright, so in terms of the vertebral column, you're going to need to know the different areas of the spine: the cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral and coccyx. Yeah, and you're also going to need to know how many bones are in each part of the spine. So 7 for the cervical, 12 for the thoracic, 5 for the lumbar, 5 for the sacral and 4 for the coccyx.